The violence continues, now in a different form. It hides under a mask. The world watches on, but there's not a single witness to stop the erasing of history. Amidst sliding images of churches and domes, so distinct and familiar to us in their Armenian architecture, the words Gars, Turkey, appear in bold capital letters. Global Heritage Fund, and the video clip begins to play. Mystical chants of Muslim prayer segue into a narrator presenting the urgency of the project in Gars. It's a race against time, he says, a race to save the archaeological treasures of a land that has witnessed the passing of multiple diverse cultures, such as the Russians, Turks, and Central Asians. Central Asians? Reality shift. All hope and excitement fall apart. Gars, an Armenian province during the Ottoman era, is the center of this project, and there's no mention of Armenians as having lived there, having built there. And as such, the video and the narration continue. One after another, the narrator and participants of the project maneuver around words and sentence structures that draw attention away from any hints of Armenianness in relation to Gars. Here's a man, perceived as an expert, talking about cultural heritage and preservation, completely misrepresenting the so-called heritage in question. Familiar names of places like Lake Van, Akhtamar, Mount Ararat, and Ani, that have lived in our collective imagination as sites of memory, are once again mentioned without context.
The work continues in Kars. The crew fans out over the entire region, looking for other key sites for possible restoration. Lake Van is a huge inland body of water, 7 times bigger than Lake Geneva in Switzerland. On Akdamar Island, the Turkish government is restoring the 10th century Church of the Holy Cross.
Well, Ani's the jewel, I think, for all of the sites in the Caucasus. It's a massive site, huge city, pre-Armenian, Armenian, Seljuk.
Armenian finally appears, only to be overshadowed by a train of other cultures and civilizations like the Seljuks. How about Gars, one of historical Armenia's largest cities in the 11th and 12th centuries? Who built its historical district, now under renovation? Do they know the history of the district in Gars? That in the years 928 through 961, Gars was the capital of Armenia. That in the year 1053, it was invaded by the Seljuks, and then by the Mongols in 1236, and that between the 16th and 17th centuries, Gars suffered as a result of the Turkish-Persian Wars. In the 19th century, due to its geographical location, Gars became a battle zone between the Turkish and Russian empires, falling under Russian rule after the war in 1877-1878. For a short-lived period, this historic Armenian capital found itself within the borders of the First Republic of Armenia, only to be used as a bargaining tool once again, this time by the Bolshevik Russians, who conceded it to Turkey on October 13, 1921, at the Treaty of Gars. How can they talk about preservation of archaeological sites, yet gloss over centuries of cultural history within which these buildings have been constructed? How can they talk about preservation of archaeological sites and deny recognition of its builders? The famous St. Arakelos Church, which was built by King Apas I during 10th century, becomes the Mosque of the Church of Apostles. Do they not see the contradiction in this term that they so loosely throw around? Where are the rest of the Armenian churches of Gars? Surp Neshan, Surp Asvadzadzin, Surp Kevork, Surp Mariam. What happened to them? Or perhaps the question should be, how and by whom were they destroyed? They no longer exist, along with dozens of institutional buildings, like the 12 Armenian schools of Gars that served the community in 1910. In probing our series of questions further, we arrive at the main question that the Global Heritage Fund denies and refuses to raise? What happened to the Armenian population of Kars? This is a new kind of genocide, a cultural genocide, hiding behind the pretense of goodwill. This is historical revisionism with a different face, operating in a new medium and rewriting the history of a place where Armenians once lived, flourished, and built, a place where they once called home, but from where they were driven out forcefully, leaving behind the structures, buildings, edifices that stood erect as silent witnesses of the massacres and deportations. It is these buildings and churches that speak our story. They embody the traces of our past. They do need to be preserved, but without the erasure of the cultural history within which they were constructed. Visit www.globalheritagefund.org. Watch the entire clip. Witness. Unveil the pretense. Take action and stop this quietly concealed violation of our churches, our cultural heritage, our homeland. If we do not stand in this historic battle to preserve our national heritage, who will?